In the cold waters of San Francisco Bay in California, United States, there stands a rocky island known as Alcatraz Island. In 1934, this island became home to one of the most secure prisons in the world, known as Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. It was not built to be comfortable, it was built to be impossible to escape. The the location itself made escape nearly unthinkable. The water surrounding the island was cold, powerful, and dangerous. Strong currents moved unpredictably. The distance to the shore of San Francisco was about 2 kilometers, but it felt much farther because of the conditions. Anyone who attempted to swim would face freezing temperatures and powerful waves. Inside the prison, security was strict. Cells were designed to prevent any form of escape. Guards monitored movements carefully. Every action was controlled. Every space was watched. The prison held some of the most dangerous criminals in the United States, men who were considered too risky for other prisons. Because of all this, Alcatraz became known as a place no one could escape. It was not just a prison, it was a symbol, a place where escape was not supposed to be possible. But history has a way of proving that nothing is truly impossible. Among the prisoners held at Alcatraz in the early 1960s were three men who would later become known around the world. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Each of them had a history of escape attempts from other prisons. Each of them understood the system, and each of them refused to accept that escape was impossible. Frank Morris arrived at Alcatraz in 1960. He was known for his intelligence and his ability to plan carefully. He was not someone who acted without thinking. He studied his environment. He observed details that others ignored. John Anglin and Clarence Anglin arrived at Alcatraz in 1961. They were brothers and they shared a strong bond. They also had experience with escape attempts. Together, they formed a group that would begin to think about something others believed could not be done. At first, their idea may have seemed impossible, but they did not see it that way. They saw the prison not just as a place of control, but as a system with weaknesses. And if there are weaknesses, there is always a possibility. The planning began quietly. There was no rush, no sudden movement. Everything had to be done carefully. Inside their cells, the men began to study the structure of the building. They noticed something important. Behind their cells, there was a service corridor. The walls of their cells were made of materials that had weakened over time. With simple tools, tools that were not designed for escape, they began to walk slowly. They used items they could find. They walked at night, making small progress each day. To hide what they were doing, they used creative methods. They placed objects in front of the holes they were creating. They made sure that guards would not notice any change. Everything had to look normal. But the plan did not stop there. They knew that even if they could leave their cells, escaping the island would be the real challenge. And so they began to think beyond the walls of the prison. The men needed more than just a way out of their cells. They needed a way to survive the journey across the water. The cold waters of San Francisco Bay were one of the biggest obstacles. Without preparation, survival would be unlikely. They began creating something unusual. Using materials they could gather, they started building a raft. It was not built openly, it was built in secret, piece by piece. Every part had to be hidden. At the same time, they created something else. To avoid being noticed during the night, they made objects that would make it seem like they were still in their beds. These objects were designed to look like human heads. This level of preparation showed something important. This was not a simple escape attempt. This was a carefully planned operation. Every detail was considered. Every risk was analyzed. The moment finally came on the night of June 11, 1962. at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco Bay, California, United States. The prison was quiet. The guards followed their usual routines. Everything appeared normal. Inside their cells, the men prepared for the final step. They placed the objects they had created in their beds. From a distance, it looked like they were sleeping. This was the moment everything depended on. One by one, they moved through the openings they had created. They entered the service corridor behind their cells. From there, they made their way through areas of the prison that were not meant for prisoners. What happened next remains one of the greatest mysteries in history. The men reached the edge of the island. They used the raft they had built, and then they disappeared into the night. No confirmed trace of them was ever found, and to this day, one question remains: did they survive?